Hey again, everyone. I'm back to talk about character development. This one is going to be the shortest video out of the 3 different literary elements that we're working with right now, because this is actually something that we do all the time. Characters are ultimately representations of people, and we analyze people as we go. Every time you walk down the street, you see people, you think things about them, you make up maybe you make up background stories for them in your mind, and you really do think about how people are, based on their body language, based on how shifty their eyes are, based on their facial expressions, based on what they say, right? So, as far as character development goes, you want to think about things that we attribute to people, to these characters. And you want to see how the character interacts with the world that they have in their story, or their poem, or the play or novel, whatever it is. So this can be a visual description, right? The narrator telling the reader about this particular person can be, saying about talking about what they dress like, how they how they present themselves to the world, what their hair looks like, what their anything, right? Anything that they can represent with visually with their bodies. Could also be a mental description, right? It could be something about how they react to certain situations. It could be, if it's third person omniscient, right? It could be talking about what they're thinking, right? It gives a description of this character. And then it could also be an interaction with another element of the story, right? It could be how the character interacts with the setting, how they interact with another character, any of those things. Okay, it could also be a description from another character. Sometimes that's the best way to kind of get perspective, especially if you've got like a third person limited perspective where the narrator is just sort of conveying information kind of like from up here, but they don't know any extra info. Right, and you can think about this as an example of going to a party, right? You go to a party and there's a bunch of people that you don't know there, and you're kind of getting an idea of who these other people at the party are without having any sort of context, right? You can see what they look like. You can see you can kind of see maybe what they're thinking or get an idea of what they're thinking. It could also be the way that they are interacting with other people, right? Imagine this is a cocktail party and, they've got, you've got fancy glasses and whatever, and there's waiters going around passing out drinks and things like that. And you can see how the person interacts with these waiters, right? Same thing at a restaurant. How do people talk to servers, right? This idea of you can learn a lot about someone by who they interact with and how they interact with other people. Same thing can happen from in a story, from a character development perspective. You can see how they grow. You can see how they don't grow. You can see how their reactions to certain things change as they become acclimatized to them. So there is a bunch of different things that you can think about in terms of characters. Now, but we can take a look at this example and we can wonder, okay, who is this person? Who are they? What are they doing? If you want to pause here and kind of think about who she is, you can totally do that. I'm going to just dive right in and tell you a little bit about what I see here, because likely it's going to match up with what you're thinking. So we can see that she's holding a cocktail glass, and she's holding it in kind of a fancy way. So we can assume that she's cultured, right? This isn't someone who got dressed up to go to a party, never goes to parties, and is just like trying to make it look good, right? You can also tell that she likely has maybe some money because of all the bling she's wearing. Those necklaces look heavy as anything, and they're definitely more impractical than they are functional, right? So she's trying to convey a message there. She's trying to show that she's glamorous and glitzy. And of course, what shows glamour and glitz more than a fluffy dog, or maybe a stuffed animal of a dog, I can't quite tell, but I think we're to assume that it's a dog, in her arms, right? And the fact that the dog is white in comparison to her black dress, makes it even more of a stark comparison, right? This dog is cute and fluffy and puffy and all of this, and she is sleek, right? It's these contrasts that happen. You can also see that her hair is done in a formal way. It's not just hanging. You can tell that she probably worked hard on it. Uh, I don't know. It looks a little bit like mine, kind of puffy, but you know, she probably worked harder on hers than I do on mine. But her makeup is done. She's got accessories that match well, right? So we can assume that she's got some money. All right. So let's move on to a description of a character, of a person. This is actually a true story from when I was in grad school. This is a description of one of my professors. This is not her name. Her name is not Dr. Blue. Don't try to find out who she is, because let's not even go there. But I went to class on a Thursday evening and met Dr. Blue for the first time. She was a tall, thin woman with wiry, unruly black and gray hair. Entering the room at a slow pace and with a wearied look in her eyes, she sat down at the head of the table. Saw that she wore black slacks with a black tank top and a black blazer. On her left ring finger, she wore a thin gold band. On her right ring finger, she wore a matching but thicker gold band. Over time, her eyes began to lose that wearied, haunted look. She wore all black for about half of term. Then she started wearing brighter colored tank tops. Then, toward the end, she began wearing brighter slacks and blazers. So, if you want to, take a second to pause and kind of think about Dr. Blue, who she is, how she's interacting with the world, and what we can kind of glean from this description of her. All right, so I've taken the time to darken the necessary information about her that shows something, that shows that she is going through something. All right, so I'm sure you've gathered that she's having a tough time. So the fact that I decided to call her Dr. Blue rather than what her actual name was, I totally almost just dropped the name. That would have been dumb. The fact that I called her Dr. Blue should be a red flag, right? When you say, when someone asks you why you're so blue, right? That usually means depressed, something like that. So again, if there's any sort of indication of color, you kind of want to think through what those colors are. You can see that she's tall and thin, wiry. She's got unruly black and gray hair, right? So she's someone who presents in the world as, kind of maybe a little bit disheveled, right? Because tall and thin with the description of wiry kind of suggests that maybe her clothes hang on her a little bit. Maybe she's lost a little bit of weight recently, something like that. Okay, the fact that she's walking slowly and she has a wearied look in her eyes shows that she's, going through something, that she's, maybe elsewhere in her brain. She sits gingerly down. Nothing that she's doing is fast-paced. She's not flying into the room and jumping into the chair, right? She's not overly excited. She's just doing what she has to do, okay? Wearing all black is a signal of mourning. Okay, so you want to kind of think of that. If you see what characters are wearing, you want to think of what it is that means. So she's got a thin gold band on her left finger, right? Wedding band. Now, there's a thicker gold band on her right finger. What does that mean? Well, a lot of times that could mean that a partner has died, right? And that the other partner, the living partner, is deciding to wear their wedding ring, their wedding band, as like a memorial or something like that. Okay, so it could be that she lost a partner. So on her, or over time, her eyes begin to lose that wearied, haunted look. Okay, so she's sort of growing through her grief. Okay, and she's able to get back into her life. Okay, she starts wearing brighter colored tank tops, right? Baby steps. Nothing happens immediately. So she starts wearing brighter colored tank tops coming out of mourning. And then she's wearing brighter colored slacks and blazers toward the end of term. Okay, so she's growing through this mourning phase, right? So from this short paragraph, we can gather that she's, maybe lost some weight because of grief. She's lost a partner. We can see that she is working through her grief, and that by the end of term, she's feeling more like an individual, more like she can go forward with her life rather than stay with that grief that she holds. Okay, so when it comes to character development, this is all stuff that we do. We do this every day. So you want to make sure that you are thinking about these characters as people, because ultimately they are representatives of people. Okay, so you want to think of that. I know I said that before, but that's really, really important. Okay, think of characters as people.